Taboo Talk with Ray and Steve podcast takes a close-up look at controversial subject matter and hot-button topics, adding humor, cynicism, and a dose of reality to the stuff we're not supposed to talk about anymore. Politics, religion, sex, gender identity, violence, corruption. Nothing is left unturned in this lighthearted approach to information dissemination. The world is experiencing a pandemic of cowardice. 80% of people do not believe the craziness they've been coerced to agree with. Grab a friend, grab a beverage, and dive in with us as we take on the narrative and blast social stigmas with truth. Here are your hosts, Patriots Ray Amanat and Steve Reed.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're at in social media land, TV land, or the blogosphere with all the different networks that we're on. Welcome to Taboo Talk with Ray and Steve. I'm Ray Amanat here, based in sunny Port Richey, Florida, and my co-host, Mr. Steve Reed, in an undisclosed location somewhere in northern Texas. As we all know, I think people are going to send out a search party to find you, Steve.
Nah, not worried. I'm in the bunker.
You're ready, huh?
Exactly. I am ready. I am ready. Ray, what in the world is going on?
Well, I don't know. We have a special guest today that's going to be talking about behavior. And I think you're setting me up because of all of my behavioral problems that you're trying to bring in the good doctor to kind of figure me out and maybe get a reset on Ray. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. But for our listening and our viewing audience, it's, if you have kids, this is a must watch and must listen to show where we've got somebody that's going to give you a ton of information about how to read and understand your child a little bit better. And with that, let's bring in Dr. Christian Weisdach with Behavior Works. Welcome to the show, Doc.
Thank you for having me, Ray. Thanks for having me, Steve. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
So how do you want us to call you? Doc, what's up, Doc? Or Dr. Weisdach? Or Dr. Christian? Or what do you usually go by?
Dr. Weisdach is just fine. That'll be perfect. I've been called a lot worse in my life. I'll go with Dr. Weisdach. That's great.
or the smartest person in the room today.
No.
What you talking about, Willis?
Yeah, exactly.
He's got jokes. Jokes.
Yes, and some of them are laughable, some of them not so much. So Ray, a little bit of background. I met the good doctor about 2 months ago in a networking group on Alignable, great little networking tool. And we just hit it off. And then we scheduled a one-on-one type meeting a week or two later. And again, she enlightened me to a lot of different things that she is doing. And so we're gonna peel back the layers today and talk about some of the things that she is doing and how she's making a difference in people's lives, children's lives, teachers' lives, parents' lives. And then some, and then of course the neighborhood and the community and the long reach is the country. So we're all kind of on that same mission of helping people as best as we can to our abilities. Dr. Weisdach, can you tell us about your work and kind of what prompted you to pursue your doctorate degree in this field?
Yeah. So my primary work focuses on helping parents of children with autism, ADHD, and behavioral concerns that are frustrated and overwhelmed with navigating behavioral issues. And so I offer strategic training and consulting that focuses on what I've come to know as the biopsychosocial approach to autism and behavior. So I really teach people that behavior is a lot more than meets the eye. And it's focused on helping uncover nutritional deficiencies and food allergies, intolerances and sensitivities, gut issues, undiagnosed vision issues. And I really came to discover this through personal and professional experiences. So over the last 18 years, I started my undergraduate degree back in 2001. It took me a long time to get through it, but everything happens for a reason. But my undergraduate degree was in human development and family studies. So to put that in a nutshell, it's basically learning about what happens psychologically and biologically with our bodies from birth to death, and understanding those experiences in between and family dynamics and how bigger systems impact our development as a human. Then I went on to my master's degree because I was working in autism support classrooms. I was working as a TSS directly with adolescents, and I went on to work with adults. So the natural progression was to get my master's degree in applied behavior analysis, because working with people with autism and applied behavior analysis is synonymous with one another. So ABA, for those people watching that don't know, is determining the function of a person's behavior that is either escape avoidance, to gain a tangible, to get attention, or to self-regulate the body. And so a lot of that experience was understanding how social experiences and environments impact behavior. But the one thing that was missing is that during my graduate coursework, they always talked about make sure you rule out medical issues as causes of underlying behavior before you work with a client. But the problem that I saw happening was that we didn't really get good information on how to rule out medical issues as underlying problems to behavior. We got some general knowledge to say that, especially if you're working with a kiddo with autism, that they might be more likely prone to have seizures or gastrointestinal issues like stomach issues and things. But there really wasn't a lot of detail around how to rule out medical issues. And through my doctoral research, which is kind of my next natural progression, because I wanted to figure out if it wasn't just my lived experience that was left out from my coursework, I wanted to study that with other people. So as my research progressed, I really found out that other behaviorists in other parts of the country were experiencing the same thing. They weren't really learning about what questions to ask when you start working with a new child, a new client, because this can be any age, about what questions to ask about their medical history to understand if some of the medical issues are causing behavior. And so that really put forth my effort into understanding this biopsychosocial approach and how we can apply it to working with kids with autism.
That was a lot.
That's a mouthful.
So it's a holistic approach, basically. It's understanding holistically how so many things that we don't talk about go into creating our behavior. You know, if a person is waking up in the morning and you're chronically tired and you're cranky and you have these mood swings and you're walking around with dark circles under your eyes called allergic shiners, there's a reason for that, right? And it's asking the right questions about a person's birth experience, their medical history, developmental history, to rule out medical issues.
Right.
That's the missing piece of the curriculum, and that's what I wanted to understand through my doctoral work, is how can we address the root causes of what's really going on with people.
So in other words, what you're saying is the neck bone is connected to the gut bone, so to speak, directly and indirectly, and it's all intertwined.
Yes.
And so you can't just fix one thing without addressing the whole thing.
I'm curious. Have you found like the diets of inner city people versus the diets of rural country people? How is it a drastic difference as to how that affects the behavior of the child?
Yes. So if people are on like fried foods and they're eating foods with preservatives, you're not feeding your gut bacteria properly. So every human needs to be on a probiotic and be taking probiotics daily, because your gut bacteria help regulate your mood, your emotion, your attention, your sleep and wake cycles. your immune system, your digestion, but also the creation of what are called neurotransmitters, which are basically chemical signals that help you regulate your body. It helps excite, but also inhibit your behavior when needed. And so if you are feeding your gut bacteria the wrong things, it's not able to produce those good, happy, mood boosting neurotransmitters that we need to make us happy and help us focus. So definitely diet plays a big role because it's called prebiotics. So the probiotics is the bacteria itself, but the probiotics is what you feed it. So really the probiotics should be coming from fruit and vegetable sources to feed the healthy gut bacteria, to make you attentive and to make you more receptive to having good immune responses and things like that. So there's a direct correlation with what you eat and how you behave in the world, for sure.
Yeah, I gotta challenge you on that. You alluded to some things in there, but I'm telling you, when I eat a Twinkie and a Snickers bar, I feel pretty happy.
Well, right. Well, right.
I'm kidding.
Well, no,
I hear what
because
you're saying.
There's certain rushes of like chemicals that the food manufacturers make it so that it's sweet, and there's this rush, right? But it's temporary, and we often have a crash after that, right?
Yeah.
But what's in it, if our bodies cannot process and break down the gluten, the dairy, some of the other things like eggs that are often in those baked goods, it actually eats away at your stomach lining, causing what's called leaky gut, and then opens you up and makes you more susceptible to autoimmune deficiencies as well.
Sure.
So yeah, the food manufacturers create that high for a reason. They want you to feel good after you eat that product, so you continue consuming it. But on the back end, the long term, it's not good for you. So.
Yeah, that used to be my go-to for many years. It was. I knew every donut shop in North Dallas. I'll just put it that way. So I learned my lesson. So I'm suffering the consequences today. So so your research really started out with you looking into things that are maybe ways to help control autism or modify the behavior. How does all of this kind of tie in together? The mental side of things, behavioral side of things, the nutrition side of things. How do all those things come together when it comes to autism?
So it's really, when I describe it to other people, it's optimizing outcomes for people that have autism, ADHD, and general behavioral concerns. But the method that I follow, it has to be done in a certain order, because if you don't address the vitamin and mineral deficiencies and the inflammation that you experience it from like gluten, dairy, eggs, other things that you might be allergic, intolerant, or sensitive to first, it's kind of like the nerves in your brain and your body have to be able to play telephone with one another. They have to be able to communicate and send information back and forth reliably to tell you about your sensory experiences in the world, what you're seeing, touching, tasting, feeling, all of those things. But what happens with inflammation is that if all of your nerves are lined up and they have headphones on, right, from this inflammation really, then all this information about your sensory experiences can't be sent back and forth reliably. So for example, one of the questions that I ask during the assessment process when I meet with a new family is about reactions to pain. So I say, is your kiddo underreactive, overreactive, or are they pretty regulated when it comes to their pain response? Is it as expected? And some kids that are underreactive, that tells me that like their peripheral nervous system isn't communicating with their central nervous system. So all the nerves, right, outside of your brain and your brainstem are not sending, they're not playing that telephone back and forth. Right. They're not giving your brain good information about, oh, what I just touched is hot, I better move my hand.
Gotcha.
So that right there indicates there's inflammation and that we need to look into dietary changes to make sure the body is starting to work properly. But that's the part of the ruling out behavioral issues that I make mandatory, because you have to understand what's going on inside the body, but knowing what questions to ask and what the answers mean is life-changing for people once you explain it in a very succinct way.
Yeah, that is fascinating. It's interesting. For the past 30 plus years, I've been helping people, primarily adults, understand their personality temperaments. I don't get into the behavioral type things per se. I'm talking about things, are you extroverted versus introverted? Are you task oriented versus people oriented? And all of those things come into play, but you're bringing in a totally different aspect of that whole thing. You may be one person at work and somebody different at home because of your environment, but you throw in the whole nutritional aspect of things, that changes everything.
So, Dr. Weisdach, I've heard you say this about 3 or 4 times so far about asking the questions. What are some questions parents should be asking to get a better handle on what's going on with their child or even themselves?
So, primarily, I ask, even starting from the beginning of the assessment, if there's been family trauma. Even when the mom was pregnant, if there was a tumultuous relationship, if the child's birth was traumatic, because that causes what are called retained or absent primitive reflexes, which is a whole nother story for another time. But basically, it's how trauma is captured inside the body. And just by asking questions like, is the child hypersensitive or hyperreactive to noises? Are they really fidgety? Are they bedwetting beyond an age where they should be potty trained? That helps us understand if they have some of those primitive reflexes that are inhibiting access to higher cortical areas in their brain that allow them to engage in executive functioning and planning skills. So again, coming back to that idea of won't behave versus can't, when you have these reflexes, depending on how you answer those questions, when you have those reflexes, you're living in a part of your primitive brain that just controls your breathing and your heart rate, things you don't have to think about. They happen when you're sleeping. So just like your breathing brain. So when you're living in that part of your brain, you cannot engage in executive functioning. That part of your brain is shut off. So when you start to bring all of these reflexes back online and you integrate them through therapeutic movement, but you're also taking out the inflammation, you make it so that you're opening up parts of the brain. So I ask questions that allude to if the child has those reflexes, but I also ask, was the child born C-section versus vaginally? Because when you can even understand the implications of that, C-sections save lives. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. But one of the things that's kind of missing from the pages of like an OBGYN's coursework, right, is helping them understand, when a child is born C-section, they're not passing through the vaginal canal. They're not getting access to that vaginal flora. And when we're born, that's super important because that coats and goes in our eyes and our ears, and we swallow some of that. And that becomes our gut bacteria that helps then control our attention and our sleep and our mood. But it also can affect those primitive reflexes as well. So just knowing if the child was born C-section or vaginal, if they're hyperreactive to sensory stimuli, if they're experiencing constipation or diarrhea, that's going to tell me about how they're digesting food, but if they have enough gut bacteria to regulate all of these other things. I ask about when they sleep, if they're a restless sleeper or they snore, because I'm thinking about, is that child going into that dream state? They call that REM sleep, that rapid eye movement sleep.
Right.
Because if you're not getting in REM sleep, then your body is not restoring itself like it should for the next day to help you maximize your outcomes for learning and attention and focus. Right. So that's just some of those questions.
I hate to do this. You're on a roll, and I don't want to get you off that roll, but we've got to take a quick commercial break.
Sure.
We will be back and resume. I want to talk about the butterfly factor as well.
Okay.
That's what I want. Latch on as soon as you can, make it hard. If I stand on one leg, can you yank me off balance? Yeah. If I stand feet wide, can you pull me off balance? Come on, what's the matter with you? How you doing? What was the first thing she did? She walked away. She took her eyes off of me. She looked away. I take her purse, I run. She goes to security, she goes to law enforcement. They're gonna say, well, what did he look like? And you're gonna be like, it happened so fast, I didn't see him coming. You didn't see him coming because I made you feel uncomfortable and you took your eyes off me and walked away. The whole point is, and this does not mean I want you to go and flirt and talk to the person, or I don't want you to go, I see you. You know, I just want you to, you know, that's a cool shirt. I'd like to get that because my kids are in soccer. I'm letting you know I'm aware of you. I'm letting you know I can describe you.
How you doing? Oh, right. Ray, so what are some of the people or groups that you currently are working with, and what's your ultimate mission with Heroes in Action?
Well, we just signed up an elementary school where I'm going to be doing 3 school assemblies for the 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade on anti-bullying. We're going to be doing a whole program for the staff. It's a community for people with autism and Down syndrome or other special needs. So we're going to be training the staff, and then we're going to be doing a whole anti-bully program for all the residents that live at these facilities as well coming up. So those are some exciting events we've got here in sunny Florida.
Very cool.
Stay tuned for more. And for everyone, if you want more information, please leave comments or questions on our Facebook live chat or on our YouTube live chat so we can answer them in a timely manner. Producer Debbie's going to be looking at those and trying to answer your questions. If you have any questions for Dr. Weisdach, let us know so we can forward them to her and she can answer your questions in real time.
And we will put her contact information on shortly, but as we normally do, this is an opinion-based program for Ray and for myself. We do our research, but obviously this is a fact-based program with Dr. Weisdach. So with that said, let's go back. And Dr. Weisdach, as we were getting ready to go to break, you were talking about C-section versus vaginal birth. And I liken that, what you're describing, to the story about the young boy. He's seeing a butterfly that's coming out of the cocoon, and he sees that it's struggling, and he takes a pair of scissors and cuts that cocoon to make it easier for the butterfly to come out. But shortly after that butterfly comes out, the butterfly died. Is that the same basic and it died because that struggle was forcing the fluids in through its wings and so forth. Is that the same basic concept that you're talking about with vaginal versus C-section?
Well, right. I mean, modern medical interventions have really saved a lot of lives, but there are different drawbacks to them as well that aren't part of the narrative that medical professionals are sharing with parents. So it's a matter of understanding how the human race has come to evolve on Earth. So many of the processes, like C-sections, right, is against what normally happens, right? A child is meant to be born typically through the vaginal canal. They have to, go through all that pushing and squeezing, and all of those nerves and everything is getting compressed. And this activation, right, of this left-right shoulder and everything is coming out. It's this beautiful, beautiful progression of the human experience. If anything happens against that, that can be perceived by the body as trauma. especially
Sure.
when it's coming out and there's C-section or the forceps or a vacuum being used. That can impact even the occipital lobe of the brain, and that's for vision. And so anything that goes counter to that impacts development. And that's why I'm trying to bring that narrative even to more medical professionals to say, if you're a physician, you're in med school, it's great to know about having these conversations with parents so they can make informed decisions about elective C-sections and understanding the implication that it has on their child's gut bacteria, the primitive reflexes that are going to impair their development, and everything that comes after that. So, but yes, in a nutshell, it goes against what normally has happened here on Earth for a very, very long time.
It's interesting. When I'm working with people, I deal a lot in my coaching practice with people that have dealt with some type of emotional trauma. And, maybe they were abused when they were a child, maybe they were abandoned, they were a victim in some way. But most of the time when I'm working with a person or that couple, it generally doesn't go back any farther than, 3, 4, 5 years old, something of that sort. But what you're saying is some of these issues that they are having as 12, 13, 15-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 40-year-olds could be traced all the way back to when they were born or before they were born.
Even before that, generational trauma can pass through 7 generations at most.
Oh my gosh.
So when you look at trauma, because there's this idea of exposomes. Exposomes is anything that you are exposed to as a person, but also your parents, what they were exposed to.
Sure.
It could be their environment, it could be stress, it could be trauma. That shapes the DNA that comes together to form you.
Interesting.
So the exposomes are this idea and these epigenetics of how nature and nurture comes together to make you who you are.
Man, this is fascinating. Ray, as I said before, he is obviously the smartest person in the room today.
Yes, she is. I agree. So I'm looking at, just from listening to you, there's a whole bunch of other people that you're probably going to have to work with to get all the information that you need, like an allergist or nutritionist. What are other professionals that you collaborate with to help you with your findings?
So the first person that I work with is a nutritionist and developmental pediatricians, as well as developmental optometrists. The developmental pediatricians are key because they can provide blood work that tells us about what are called IgG, IgE, and IgA antibodies. Because typical blood work that a pediatrician would run really doesn't show that. Because these antibodies show up in your bloodstream as a reaction from an intolerance or a sensitivity to food. And those are really important because those are the things that are confounding that signaling in the body. So once we get information like that, and we can collect hair samples as well, because you take a hair sample from the nape of the neck, you'd have to let yours grow out a little bit, Ray, to get a sample, but they could collect it anyhow. Because when you take that hair sample from the nape of the neck, there should be heavy metals in it. Because naturally our bodies detoxify if, and only if, our MTHFR and our SUOX genes are working properly to help our bodies detoxify. So you can do hair, blood, and urinalysis, but people that are working with teams like developmental pediatricians and nutritionists, people that can do the accurate blood work, and that's key to help understand not only the antibodies that are showing up in the blood, but also the vitamin mineral deficiencies and some stool sampling to understand if there's gut dysbiosis or not. So back to your other question about what I ask, is I talk a lot about poop. Working with small kids, I know it's not a pleasant thing, but you have
That's my favorite subject.
It's taboo.
Go ahead, Ray.
But,
it's time for a sound effect, Ray. Not the one I was thinking of. Exactly.
But understanding that a kiddo should not be going to the bathroom 3 or 4 times a day, and they also shouldn't be going every 3 or 4 days. It should be a regularity once a day, and there shouldn't be this overwhelming smell. Like, if there's an overwhelming smell to the poop, right, that means there's too much bad bacteria, and that's not good. You want to have a good, healthy balance, because again, that gut bacteria, I refer to it as like a human recipe. Each person has their own recipe they should be following, but you probably don't know what your recipe is until you get blood work, but done by the right person. That way you can follow your recipe and take things out that shouldn't be in there and put things in that should be. One thing is probiotics, and a lot of, like here in Pennsylvania, we don't get a lot of vitamin D from the sun. So my kids had vitamin D, calcium, magnesium, and zinc deficiencies, and that affects your hormones and your enzymes, right? So it's a matter of understanding all of that blood work, the hair analysis, the urinalysis, and getting a comprehensive understanding of what is that child's or person's human recipe. What does that look like? So that's the developmental pediatrician side and the nutritionist. But then there's also developmental optometrists that I work with and refer to, because kids with autism and ADHD are 40% more likely to have what's called oculomotor dysfunction. And that's related to primitive reflexes too. But a developmental optometrist specifically looks not just at vision, like if you can see a 20-point font in a 20-foot distance, that's what 20/20 vision means. They look at, are the eyes working together? Yep. So this is part of the assessment that I do with families, because you can see if like a child is like side-eyeing the television, or they're very near to their work, or they're getting headaches, or they're having like these outbursts in the car. You can tell that there's, or depth perception issues, you can tell that their eyes aren't working well together. Maybe they complain of double vision, blurry vision, a lot of things that are going on that are typically considered behaviors. Maybe they're escape or avoiding reading. But that's when I refer to a developmental optometrist, because they can look at those eye teaming issues and understand exactly how to treat those.
Kristen,
we got to do another commercial break.
We do, and I want to in just a second, though. But for our listening and viewing audience, we normally talk about taboo topics like religion and gun rights and trafficking and so forth. I frankly, this is, I think, one of our best taboo topics, because nobody talks about these things. I am so thankful that we connected a few weeks back. Before we go to break, would you give our listening and viewing audience your website and your email address? I've got your website scrolling across the screen, but for those in our listening world, they can't see our screen.
Sure. So the website is www.behavior, BEHAVIORWORX of southwesternpa.com. And then my email address is the Behavior Works. Again, that's BEHAVIORWORXPA@gmail.com if people want more information.
And we will put that back up on the screen again in a few minutes. But yes, we're going to go to a break, so hold on to your socks, folks.
Life isn't always sunshine and roses. Sometimes it's full of roadblocks. The kind that aren't as easy to fix as filling a hole or repairing a car. Personal roadblocks are another thing altogether. Why do I feel stuck? The same things anger me every time. Why am I doing this anyway? Fixing it yourself can be frustrating and confusing. And if more than one person is involved, DIY might mean destroy it yourself. Maybe it's time for another solution. Steve Reed shines a light on your roadblocks and helps you find the best way forward for you. Stephen Reed Ministries, bringing light and hope for a victorious life. To overcome your roadblocks, schedule an appointment with Steve Reed today.
I'll tell you what, I'm looking at Dr. Weisdak is going to give you a lot more tools in your toolbox for getting people to understand why they think the way they think.
There is no question about that. And I'm just showing a couple of slides for some of the programs that I take people through. One of the first ones that I did was actually, it's titled Finding Emotional Freedom. And I do a lot of emotional trauma coaching. With that, I help people understand their personality temperaments, understanding what their dreams are, how to become the best you. And Dr. Weisdek, you have really opened up my mind to a lot of things that the average person wouldn't consider. Well, I have triggers on this and that, so forth and so on, but it may be something that's going on internally because of their diet and other habits. It could be something, as you said, generational type things that could be causing the problem. And unless we understand those things, then you may just be hitting your head up against the wall. I haven't had many people that I haven't been able to help. The only ones that so far to date that I haven't really been able to help are those people that frankly are narcissists, because they refuse to listen. They're going to do things their way. Could that be traced to some of this biological stuff or nutritional things as well?
So it would be a matter. I haven't really worked with narcissistic people. That's not really my specialization.
You're blessed. You're blessed.
But it deserves a conversation around that, to understand that people have a blueprint, right, on how to operate financially, socially, emotionally in the world. So understanding some of those generational influences definitely impacts that.
Right.
But just your thought process, your ability to process what's going on around you efficiently and effectively, it does come down to nutrition and making sure that you have the right gut bacteria so that you're not overly anxious and depressed. Before I changed my diet, I had a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, waking up really tired even after I had slept for 8 hours. So yeah, it impacts the way that you show up in the world for sure. But it definitely warrants a deeper conversation with some folks to see, what are some underlying behavioral issues going, or what are some underlying biological issues going on that haven't been addressed yet.
Yeah, and in my practice, I do a lot on the behavioral side, really geared towards what are the triggers that are causing you to do different things. Is it a smell? Is it a taste? Is it a sound? Is it a song? Is it somebody else's behavior? So there may be some triggers that are going on from an emotional perspective.
Right.
I don't get into gut health and that sort of thing in the foods, although I generally tell people, and I had one client a while back that he was drinking excessively. I said, well, how's that working for you? It's not. My family hates me. I said, okay, what do you think you need to do? I said, I don't know. That's why I'm here talking to you. How about stop drinking? Kind of a simple one there. Crazy,
so here's the funny thing about that too, Steve, is a lot of people that I see it in my young clients, because beer has a lot of gluten in it. So bringing it back to the gluten and the dairy I mentioned earlier, a lot of kids are like clamoring and addicted to bread, right? Or addicted to milk because they're just eating copious amounts of it throughout the day. They're clamoring to get on the counter to eat a full loaf of bread. So much of that in early life, if a child is having this sensory processing issue where their nerves aren't communicating with their brain properly, they're trying to get a sensory experience, but also calm. When children cannot properly break down gluten and dairy, it turns it into what are called casomorphins and gluteomorphins, which is an opiate in the body. So they are essentially getting regulated from the foods they're eating, but it's a double-edged sword because on the other side of that, their body cannot properly process and break down those proteins, and it's causing gut dysbiosis, leaky gut. It's eating away at your stomach lining, and it's allowing what are called long-chain amino acids into your bloodstream. And then your body can't detect whether it's a long-chain amino acid it makes or from the mystery thing that's coming into your body, this protein it can't break down. So that's the beginning of autoimmune disorders. So it's this double-edged sword that they've actually studied the urine of children with autism and found what are called exorphins, EXORPHINS, which is the higher amounts of the opiates that are caused by the inability to break down the gluten and dairy. So it actually regulates you, but on the other side, it's causing these other problems that nobody's really talking about.
So, quick question for you, doctor. When you have other doctors misdiagnose your child or a child, and then they bring them to you and you say, no, it's this, and when you get them on the proper diet or the proper meds or the proper whatever, their life goes back to normal. What does that do to the other doctor as far as, can parents sue for malpractice, or what are the legal repercussions for doctors that don't have their hands on any of this research that you have that can quite be very harmful to their child?
Well, I don't know that there are any legal repercussions, because here's what's happening. And this is what my doctoral research, it took me from a place of being emotionally responsive about this and being really agitated and aggravated. I went from a place of being emotional to understanding that it's a systemic problem in the education that they're receiving because of the way that the medical community operates. Their education and the research and the funding that they're receiving is creating this cyclical issue. And so it's not an issue of malpractice. It's something that these doctors just don't learn about. Yeah. They typically have an average of like 3 and maybe 10 hours of nutrition training the whole time that they're completing their residency and their program. So it's a matter of just lack of information, just like I found in my research in the community of behavior analysis and behavior specialists, that's left out of our curriculum. It's a lack of understanding. So anytime that you work with a provider, that's not holistic and is not trained to look at the whole person, and that's why I teach people in my trainings and consultation that it's so important to build a good quality team, but to also understand that there's other ways to approach it. There's lifestyle medicine, there's nutrition, right? And so it's not a matter of really legal action. It's just working with the right providers that did receive that training and do have that knowledge of holistic approaches.
Well, and are willing to listen to an alternative way of evaluating things, as opposed to the doctors that all they want to do is push drugs. Okay, you got this issue, here, take a pill. Oh, but it's causing this side effect. Oh, we'll take this pill. Yeah, but now it's causing that. Okay, now take this pill, and all of a sudden you've got this cascading effect, is that you're not really dealing with the root cause, you're just dealing with symptoms. It sounds like you're dealing with the cause of the dysfunction or dis-ease, and as a result, you're getting proven results.
Yes, and as long as I have full buy-in from families, now this is anecdotal, of course, and everybody's different, but I've seen results very quickly. I just had a child that I started working with that is 17 months old. He was 17 months old on Monday when I saw the family. And when I started working with him about 3 weeks ago, he wasn't really making eye contact. He wasn't babbling. Didn't want to really engage in functional play with his toys. He was flipping them over and observing the nuts and bolts that held them together. He had a basketball hoop he was flipping over and trying to climb on top of. Right. And just was really interested in TV shows and was flapping when he got excited. So what we've done is remove gluten and dairy from his diet, introduce some probiotics, and he's a completely different child. He's making eye contact. He is starting to sleep better throughout the night. He started to babble and say mama, dada, baby, gaga, labeling other family members. Right. He's engaging in functional play with his toys, and he's just like a whole different kid. But that's why I say maximizing outcomes for families, because it's not curing anything, because at the genetic level, you're the same person, and you have different ways that your brain hemispheres connect. So you're always going to be that same person, but it's optimizing outcomes by understanding and treating the root causes that are going on.
Fascinating. And I would love to keep talking, but we got to go to another real short commercial break. So hang on.
Entertainment expands your horizons, takes you on fantastic adventures, challenges your skills. Independent media never looked so good. Welcome to a new sphere of influence. Our words mean business. Traditional families are honored, and the American flag still flies.
Doctor, we've only got a few minutes left. Unfortunately, I had some technical issues, so we got started a little bit late. But as we start to wrap up, we talked briefly about doctors and prescribing medications and so forth. Are there some things that you have discovered about that whole world of doctors and pharmacies and pharmaceutical companies and so forth? Is there something that we need to be aware of in that world as well?
So when I was doing my research on dietary changes in nutrition, the one thing that I discovered is in 2010, Obama enacted something called the Sunshine Act.
Okay.
And the Sunshine Act dictates that anytime a physician receives more than $10 from a pharmaceutical company, it has to be openly shared. So there's a great website that people can go to, openpaymentsdata.cms.gov, and it talks about how much money your physician, your primary care doctor, is receiving from those pharmaceutical companies. One of the things particularly that I found when I was doing my research is there was a paper there was a primary investigator and a co-author, and the premise of the research was saying that gluten-free, dairy-free diets didn't have any impact on autism symptoms.
Okay.
Well, as I researched, the primary investigator of the research on that open payments data found nothing, but the secondary researcher had received $330,000 from a pharmaceutical company in the prior year when they would have started the research. From a company called Allergen, which sells pharmaceuticals to counteract allergic reactions.
Okay, so it sounds like there may have been some bias in this research.
Yes, and there was no conflict of interest statement whatsoever. So that's another thing that I found in my world of behaviorism, but also a lot of other research, is that there's really no check-ins on conflict of interest statements in research. So that was a glaring one that I found, and it's impacting a lot of families because the medical system, unfortunately, makes it so that the doctors, even though they're passionate about their work and really care about patients, have minimums or maximum times that they can spend with a patient before they have to go on to the next. They're locked into that system.
Yep.
So I want to be fair to say that doctors are in it because they're passionate about caring for people, but when they're locked into that medical model, there are definitely some things that are happening that other people should know about, especially when they go to a physician that is telling them that they have to take certain medications or they have to do certain treatments, because people have options and they need to know about if their doctor has their best interests in heart or not.
Right, very appropriate. I hate to do this. We are at the end of our time.
I think we should bring her back.
Absolutely, and we'll plan about 6 hours next time. Wow. Okay, give our audience one more time your email address, and then I'll put the web address up as well.
Sure. So the email address is behaviorworkspa@gmail.com. That's behaviorworkspa@gmail.com. And then people can also schedule a 30-minute complimentary call about services. That's calendly.com/behaviorworkspa as well.
Now, obviously, you're working with people not just in southwestern Pennsylvania, but you'll work with people around the country, around the world.
Well, right, because primarily it's working to talk with parents about what are the root causes and who they can work with locally If people can know that there is an occupational therapist that can help with those primitive reflexes, or there's a developmental optometrist that can help with your child's ocular motor issues in your area, they need to know about those providers they can be working with, or there's a nutritionist in your area. So yes, I work with people all over.
Okay, so Ray, make a note. Actually, have producer Debbie make a note. Next time we have you on, I want to hear some success stories. Little Johnny was dealing with this, and now he's totally different. You gave us that one. I think that's a great story. I want to hear more stories and more success things, so that people can say she's not just some quack. She really knows what she's talking about, and we need to be able to hear more about that, so that you can share your information with more people. And the website, again, if you've got a doctor that you are suspecting is getting a little something on the side, why don't you give our audience that website again as well?
Yeah, so that's openpaymentsdata.cms.gov. But just to make sure that your doctor has your best interest in heart, and that you're having informed decision-making conversations, that you're not just pushed in one direction, that you know all your alternative options, and that you have some autonomy in controlling your own life and your health.
Yeah. Now, we're not here to slander anybody. But folks, you may want to go to that website and check and see exactly how much your practitioners are.
I think a couple of my doctors will be very well paid on by some of the pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah, so we're not going to be showing any of that. If you want to look up your doctors, you go right ahead. We're just providing the resource. It is a government website. It's available to anybody. So, wowzers. Doctor, thank you so much. I am so excited that you came and joined us for this very, very quick hour. Again, I want to have you back. And, folks, if you've got questions, reach out to us at email. Our email address is tabootalkwithRayandSteve@gmail.com. And if you're on Spotify or iHeartRadio or Apple, iTunes, or Rumble, you can find us there, other episodes, as well as our YouTube Live and our Facebook Live episodes. So, Doctor, any closing comments for us, as we've got about 30 seconds left?
If you have a child with special needs, trust your gut and make sure that you're working with a doctor that has your best interests at heart. Excellent.
And don't trust your child's gut.
Yes.
Because it may not be. Ray, anything for us as we wrap things up? Yeah.
That was a little late, but hey.
Yeah, well, that's okay. I'll take it.
No, Doctor, that's for you. Thank you for coming on the show and giving us a little brain tease on opening our eyes to the root causes of what some of these problems can be caused by. And we look forward to having you back on our show. As always, if you would like to be a sponsor on our show, MyPillow, please get a hold of us, MyPillow, Mike Lindell, and we would love to talk to you. Hint, hint. I have MyPillow and Giza sheets and everything, so...
Yeah, we could do the Patriot Telephone people as well, and
Pure Talk as well.
Yeah, Pure Talk, and there are all kinds of people. So, but we're out of time for that. Someday, Ray, we need to do an entire episode on nothing but those suggestions. But that's all we have time for today. So, y'all have a blessed day. See you next time.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Taboo Talk with Ray and Steve. If you have suggestions for topics you would like us to discuss, or you would like to become a sponsor, reach out to us today at tabootalkwithRayandSteve@gmail.com. In the meantime, check out the other amazing programs on OBBM Network on all your favorite podcast platforms. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and comment. Join us again for another fun and informative opinion-based episode This is Taboo Talk with Ray and Steve.